Okay, so I want to just kind of like recap a little bit, right? Because we're taking in so much information in these are very like big concepts. But again, the purpose of us, learning these concepts is to really kind of like have an approach to learning the Torah, learning the commentaries, learning the different, books. When I was when I, one of the things when I was in yeshiva, like the first yeshiva I started with, I learned at different ones, right? And you pick up different skills at different ones, type of thing. But one of the first ones I learned at was this place called Or Sameach. And the thing that one, I mean, they had a lot of great things there, right? But one of the things that I felt was one of the most impactful parts of their learning program was like their introduction to like basically Jewish literature, right? And so that opening up, like, open up this whole world of like writers and authors and essays and of people just like throughout the ages, like thousands and thousands of years, people and elaborating on this and all these different things. And so that opens up a whole nother conversation, like in terms of what you're doing. And so when we read the Torah, we have to like have that critical thought in terms of like, like what perspective am I learning it from? What is the tradition of how I enter this study, right? Like in these things, like a lot of these things in like Western thought aren't even really thought about. Like everything is under the umbrella of academia. You know what I mean? So it's like the same approach you would have for a book in chemistry, you would have to the Bible. You know what I mean? You would read it, you would analyze what's being said, and you'll come to conclusions, right? And so that's the approach that most people have with all spirituality, right? But then when you go into Jewish literature, most of the great books had introductions to even get into the book. You know what I mean? To build into the book, right? And so that's like one of the things we're getting by Rav Ashlag is that this is his introduction, right? And so he's doing it. So where we're at now in this conversation is like we're really going deep into this idea of the desire to receive, right? And the different levels. And he says, there's in essence, there's four different levels of how the desire to receive, is manifest. It's kind of a trip thing too, because today, like, I was like, I had to travel. So, I mean, I went into the old city of Jerusalem, but I was like sitting there, waiting for the train, and it was just like I was looking at everything and like from the perspective of desires, and it was like, whoa, it was like kind of a crazy thought, but um anyways, so he starts off and he basically goes into four levels of desire, which we understand are the four kingdoms, right? Which is the rock kingdom, rock, dirt, minerals, these types of things. They all have the spark of the creator within them, and they're actually they exist. You know what I mean? Like they're real. It's a real thing. A rock is a real living entity. Not in a way that the level above it, which is plants, right? Plants, trees, these types of things, fungi, these types of type of things, algae, all of these things are that. And I remember there was a question asked, last class, well, about like different types of plants, right? Because, even when we look at the rock kingdom, right, there's different types of rocks. You know what I mean? There's different functionalities of rocks, right? And so we can kind of look at how God designed these, like, why are some mountains so big, and you have rocks that are so tiny, or sand, you have sand, a grain of sand, you have a grain of sand, and then you have a Mount Everest, you know what I mean? So, like, what is God like trying to tell us in that? So that's like kind of like the idea is to be able to say, like, hey, look at the world around us and not just see differences, but rather similarities from the frame of different expressions of one idea, which is desire, right? And then you see the thing with animals, all types. I mean, you have animals that are almost as smart as human beings, right? And then you have, animals that, like I don't know if snails are considered animal. I mean, I think they're insects, but they move around, right? So, anyways, and then you have the highest aspect, which is the human kingdom, right? Now, the thing that we remember from the last episode or last, class is this idea of saying that, okay, well, um, what separates, the rocks in the plant kingdom is this idea that the the rock itself is mundane, right? The rock itself is mundane, and it has aspects of movement, but very little, right? Like maybe a rock will fall off, whatever. And then you have the plant kingdom, and the plant kingdom is pretty much in line with the sun, right? It has more movement, it has more dynamic, and he says that it's able to, like, give off waste. It kind of like it eats food. This thing, so it has a different level of functionality, right? And then you have the level above that, which is the animal kingdom, right? And the animal kingdom is moving around, is doing things, it's taking, it can even build to some degrees, these type of things. But the main idea that Rav Ashlag points out is like the difference between the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom is a lot of it has to do with movement, right? And ability to move and survive, and these types of things. And so when it comes to the human kingdom, right? The difference between the animal and the human is this aspect of empathy, right? And empathy is the big mechanism that is utilized to separate the animal and the human being. The human being has the ability to see someone far away, someone that he has no connection to, and empathize with his situation or her situation, right? It has ability to empathize with its fellow outside of itself, right? This whole idea what we're talking about, this idea of being lishma, doing it for the sake of doing the holy act, right? That idea, right? That idea is something that's innate to the human being, right? So now we're exploring this concept of the human being, and then now he's going to go a little bit further, and we're going to talk about like the different worlds, right? But so now he's going to talk about, whatever. We're going to the self-explanatory, but it's just an important endeavor, because we need to internalize these ideas, because we have to teach people to see a new world, right? Like we have to be able to like say like, hey, when you go outside, you have to see the world of desire, right? You have to see the world of souls. You have to see the worlds of different sparks and different aspects of God expressed in all of these different, entities, right? These expressions of creation, whether it's inanimate objects or plants or trees, vegetation, or if it's animal, wild stock, whatever. And in the human, you have to see how everything is ultimately connected together, right? And another and I thought this was probably one of the biggest ideas, right, from Rav Ashlag in the last class, is and this is huge, right? So in essence, Rav Ashlag says that the human being, right, the human being in essence is receiving all the time, right? We're receiving Hashem's light all the time. That's why we're alive, right? Every single person is receiving God's light all the time. But now, what is the significance of that? He says that the whole purpose of creation was God to bestow his light to us, right? So God created us with this desire to receive, right? We have this desire to receive God's light. God wants to give the light, right? Okay, perfect marriage, right? But the thing is like this. The thing is like this. Rav Ashlag is bringing that it's not just the it's not just the receiving component, right? It's not just a receiving component. What Rav Ashlag is saying is that it's the receiving component in acknowledging that it comes from the creator, right? That's the big idea. The big idea is to say that it's not just about me receiving God's light. The main point is like it's not about receiving God's light. And if you're logging on and off, it's totally fine, because the class is recorded. So any parts you'll be able to jump back and get those pieces. So don't worry. But the point is saying, Rav Ashlag is saying that all humans are in essence receiving God's light all the time. So our job to fulfill the purpose of creation is to acknowledge the receiving of God's light. And by acknowledging that it comes from the creator, that it comes from this process, it comes from Hashem, it comes from the Ein Sof, it comes from the endless world. Once we acknowledge, that that's the case, then we fulfill the purpose of creation, because it's not just about receiving God's light, it's about receiving God's light, and receiving God's light from the frame of converting it to the desire to share, right? And so the consciousness of the desire to share, right? The consciousness of the desire to share is in essence saying like this: this light is connected to the source. Once I acknowledge that it connects to this source, this aspect of the me receiving just for myself or my ego breaks. And now this desire that I had to receive is now converted to this greater desire, which is reunification, which is giving it like a rocket boost, right? Okay, so that's the that's one of the main ideas to come in with, right? Because this is a humongous thing, because now we're saying that the Torah and the mitzvot, these are the mechanisms that allow us to recognize and connect properly to the creative system, which is the blueprint or the purpose of creation, which is to reunify with the creator. It's the Torah and the mitzvot. It's like even when you think about it, you eat a fruit, right? You eat a fruit and you say a blessing. Why are you saying a blessing? Well, God says we should, or our sages teach that we should, right? Okay, fine. But what's really being said? What's being said is that when I'm eating this, I'm getting pleasure. I'm receiving pleasure. This pleasure I'm receiving. Now, God says the next level is when you receive this pleasure and you acknowledge that it comes from me. You acknowledge that it comes from this infinite, and this is the purpose of creation. This is everything in the Torah. It comes from me. It comes from me. It comes from me. God, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. Like that, we're acknowledging that it comes from this source. And this is the purpose of creation. It's just for us to do that. As crazy as it sounds, it's like if you look at all the 613 mitzvahs, it's all either engaging us in activities, that connect us to God, right? It's engaging us in activities that connect to God, right? Or is prohibiting us from doing things that disconnect us from God, right? So the positive mitzvahs, what are the things that we do? The connection points, the things that we go after, right? The things we go aspire to do. The negative mitzvahs are the ones that we stay away from, the things that we don't do, right? So the idea is to say so this acknowledgement system, right, which is the 613 mitzvahs, this acknowledgement system is the basis of why God created the world. And we make it so difficult, right? We make it so difficult. Shabbat, we're acknowledging the creator. We're acknowledging the week. The whole week we had, Hashem gave us this whole week. We have this time of acknowledgement, right? And so this is the process. This is the blueprint of creation, right? And so when we think about it, right? When we think about this process of going deeper and deeper into spirituality, is to understand that this whole thing is about our relationship with something that we've already been given, right? Something that we've already have coming to us, something that we're receiving every second of the day. So by us keeping the Torah, we're just doing our part, right? And our part is to fulfill the mission, the purpose of creation, which is to acknowledge the source, right? And the Torah shows us how to do that. How do we know how to acknowledge the source? I don't know. I couldn't figure it out, right? I don't have enough time in the day to figure it out. Oh, wow, they've been talking about this since Mount Sinai. And even before then, since the times of Abraham. And before then, the times of Noah, right? And before then, all the way back to Adam Rishon, the first man, right? That's the dilemma, right? That's the dilemma. The dilemma is, you know, the dilemma is reconciling that, right? Because we make religion so incredibly heavy, right? In it's life or death, and if we make this mistake, we're finished and this, but it's really so simple. We're receiving so much. It's like imagine like, having someone, a friend, that, made a lot of money or whatever, and he bought all of his friends' houses. You guys all live in the same neighborhood, and he says, you know what, for the next, you know, 6 months, you know, every meal that you guys eat is going to be at my place, is going to be catered for the next 6 months. That's what it is. You got to do it, right? For all the good things you've done for me, this is the thing, right? And so say a person does that, right? And so you start going to your friend's house, and I mean, your friend bought you this house. You're not so rich. You're not so rich. I mean, he bought you a house. You have a little bit of money, but he's extremely rich, right? And so every day you're going to his house, and you're eating and this type of thing, whatever. And so you go to your friend's house, and you become a little bit like, like I don't say the word jealous, right? It's not that you're jealous. It's just more so like you're like embarrassed in a way. You know what I mean? Like it's a good thing. It's making him happy, but you're kind of like embarrassed a little bit. Like, God, like he's just doing so much for me. He's paying for all this, blah blah blah. I don't know, you know what I mean? Like it's a thing, right? But it's like this. After a while, you may start to kind of, in a way, resent the process of going over there, and you may not necessarily say thank you. After a while, right? You may not say, you may not say thank you. You may, kind of like, because you're embarrassed, you know what I mean? And you like eat and you like leave, right? Because this is over a 6 month period. Imagine every day for 6 months you go to a particular place or whatever. So, by the time you're in month three, right? Month four, you come in and you eat and you leave. You're not gonna have a conversation every day, right? So you kind of like, over time, because you're such a routine and you're getting all the time and you're there and it's a routine, it's there, you lose this sense of appreciation that this is your friend who's providing this for you, right? And you lose that appreciation, and so you become, somewhat like arrogant. Like you start to say, like, you know what, this food that you're providing for me, right? It really, you owe it to me. Like I did this for you, I did that for you, I do that to compensate for the embarrassment, right? To compensate for the embarrassment, you start to tell yourself things like, oh, you know what, he actually owes me this, or she owes me this, right? Because I did this for them when she was a kid, or when he was an adult, or when they're in college, and blah blah blah, and this, and you start to develop this thing like, actually, he's not doing me a favor. Actually, he's not doing a hesed. Actually, he owes me this. He owes me this food, right? First, you started off, he bought you a house. You're like, wow, I can't believe, I'm so thankful. You live in the same neighborhood. He says, you know what? For the first 6 months, you're not going to eat. You're not going to buy any food. You're going to come here every day and eat. It's going to be catered, all your favorite foods. 6 months, breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. Now you're like, no, that's too much. You're like, no, you got to do it. And you're like, okay, fine. He says, fine. And you start doing it, right? And you start going every single day. You start going every single day. And then, eventually, you know what? You become like, kind of embarrassed. Like, why do you, guys providing all this for me so much, blah, blah. And to compensate for the embarrassment, you start telling yourself in your head, like, hey, it's not that he's doing a charity for me. It's not that he's doing a charity. He actually owes me because I did this thing for him when I was younger, and now he has money. So he owes me this. And so you develop this attitude that it's yours, and you come every day, you're this, blah, blah, blah. You don't even say thank you. He's like, yeah, 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 yeah. You finally paying me back, right? This is the dynamic with the creator. We are receiving all the time from the creator. All the time we're receiving, to the point we don't even acknowledge the creator. We don't even acknowledge why we have the things that we have in our life. We don't have any idea. We just say, hey, you know what? It's mine. It's entitled to me. I made the money. I did this. I woke myself up. I gave myself good health. I did this, right? Just like you go to the friend's house, you get so tired of him providing for you every day. that you start to tell yourself that he owes you, right? And that's your way of compensating for coming every day and eating and being dependent to a degree. So it's the same thing by the creator. We don't want to acknowledge that every single second that we have is life. We should say every second, thank you, Hashem. Thank you, Hashem. Thank you, Hashem. Because he's giving us life. And when we say that, this is the purpose of creation. We can't even believe it. You think it's like some mystery in a cave somewhere and you got to go and dig it out and find it. No, we just have to acknowledge the creator. And how do we acknowledge the creator? Through keeping the Torah and its precepts, because that's our GPS to know how to do it. So anyway, so let's go into the text and go back into the worlds, right? But yeah, I mean, it's not that it's like that we pray, we acknowledge it, we talk to God. You know what I mean? It's like every second. I mean, we're just okay. So let's go into this. Okay. 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 So all right. So okay. So we're in this conversation. We're in this conversation of oh wait. No, we skipped a little bit, sorry. There's a couple pieces we stopped at before this. Okay. All right. So let's do this. Okay. So okay. So we left off exactly what we were talking about, right? And it says, and so now we're going into now that we create this structure of reality and this whole thing. Now we could kind of like go into it. So it says Vedivuda ani she'in daver ze mi kabel kalala al da'at cholech min. So he says like this. I know that many philosophers disagree. What disagree with what? What Mordecai was just Rabbi Mordecai was just saying. Disagree. What is he talking about, Rabbi? He just gave you a short synopsis of what we learned in yesterday's class, right? So he says, I know that just many philosophers disagree. They reject the idea that a lowly and insignificant human, in their eyes, is the center of creation and lofty creation, right? Right? Just by acknowledging the creator in all things. This is unbelievable. These philosophers are compared to a worm growing inside a radish, believing that God's world is bitter, dark, and small, like the radish, into which the worm was born. As soon as it leaves the skin of the radish and glances outside of it, the shocked worm says, I thought the entire world was like the radish into which I was born. And now I see such great lights and wonders and beautiful wonders. Ken otam hamishukaim mikali fit haratzon kabel shalechem shava. So he says, by by acknowledging that okay okay, so they think of those who are embedded in the klipa of their unborn desires to receive. They never attempt to attain the special spice of Torah and practical mitzvot, which are capable of breaking through the hard shell and transforming them into the desire to give satisfaction to the Creator. So he's saying something really deep. He says, how can these people who create these philosophies think outside of the frame of the soul of the person who's 13 years old? Right? Right? Because we're only saying that the only way you could leave that state, right, is if with the Torah and mitzvot. That's the only way you could leave that state of complete desire to receive. So he's saying that these people who create these philosophies, this is huge. The people who create these philosophies in the world, their whole thinking is in the klipa because they've never broken out of it. They've never had the tools of Torah and mitzvot. So they're only looking at the world controlled by the klipa. And so he says, and they are the ones who feel compelled to claim that humans are worthless and nothing, for that is what they truly are. See, this is the perception, right? How can people go out and murder and kill a million people, right? Right? They have to see them as worthless, right? Or just it doesn't matter, right? He says, for this is what they truly are. They cannot even consider the possibility that all of creation is for their sake. They were they dedicated to Torah and the mitzvot in order to give satisfaction to the Creator with all of the purity, proper purity. They would be able to break through the klipa of the unborn desire to the selfish receive and replace it with a desire to give. Immediately their eyes would be open. Ooh, that's a big statement. And he says, and they would be able to see themselves in all of their lofty levels of clear wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Therefore, the soul ending beautifully and pleasant, which are prepared for them in the spiritual world. It says, and they would themselves agree with the statement of the sages. A good guess, what does he say? And how much effort did he host? How much effort did the host expend on my behalf? Okay. So let's go back a little bit, right? So he said something that was really interesting. So he makes a statement here. And I don't know, maybe I'm looking into it, maybe it was a hint, but he says, if they were able to get past this limited selfish desire to receive, he says immediately their eyes would open. So the first thing that comes to mind when you think about someone opening their eyes is the Torah when it talks about Adam and Chava, right? Like it talks about their eyes opening, right? And then being able to see. So that's a very interesting critique that Rav Ashlag just gave us on, modern day philosophy, modern day, thought, political thought, measures. It's like if we're saying that this is how the soul is, and the soul is in a place of this, like, basically the born level of the soul, which is in a place of complete desire to receive, and it doesn't have any tools to break that desire to receive, then we have to really critique the information that we're given and who's giving it and what world and what frame do they come from. Like when these people create these things like Planned Parenthood and a lot of these things, it's like, what's their thinking process, right? So it says, "Ve'idin nisar la. So he says the question remains: in the end, why does God need these upper worlds that God has created for them? So I think we touched on it. I mean, he kind of alluded, in my opinion, to this idea of the upper worlds and the awareness of them is there to expand man's desire, right? So let's see where he goes with it. Veseriga shetadat shemitza od kola ha o halamot maneko chetela. So he says, know that the existence of all the worlds is generally divided into five parts. Okay. All right. So this is where we're going to go to a really high level. And you're going to have to come back and review this because he's going to bring this language that he's going to bring is very, very important, right? And she says all the existence of the world can be divided into five parts. Okay, the first part being Adam Kadmon, right? Which means like primordial man, Adam Kadmon. Okay, second part is Absolute, right? The world of emanation. Bria, the world of creation, the world of Yitzira, the world of formation, and the world of Asiya, the world of action. Each one of these contain infinite details. They have five aspects. He says they are aspects of five sphirot. He says he says kahav tum, ketu chokma bina tiferet, and malchut. Okay, so ketu chokma bina and malchut. Ketu chokma bina malchut. He says hachav tum. So he says this is to say that the world of Adam Kadmon is Keter. And the world of Absolute is Chokmah. Okay, that's interesting. Okay. Okay, so he's saying the world of Adam Kadmon is Keter, the world of Absolute is Chokmah, and he says Bria is Bina, and Yitzira is Tiferet. Okay, in the world of Asiya is Malchut. So it's okay. So he's saying that okay. So there's a system. Okay. So there's five levels. If you can imagine, we talked about it before. There's four worlds that we function in, but here he's saying there's actually five worlds, right? And there's a top world called Adam Kadmon, right? That's this upper level of energy. So what are we talking about worlds? We're talking about the different expressions of God's light as it emanates into this reality, all into the world that we see, right? And so there's a process of how God light comes into this world, and there's different expressions of worlds that it goes down through, right? So in essence, even though it seems like we live in one world, which is the world of action, the world of Asiya, right? But in reality, we're functioning in multiple worlds at the same time. In the same way that our soul is a part of our soul is in the body, but that's only the lowest part of the soul. That's the nefesh. But the ruach, the neshama, the chayim, the kita, they're in a higher place, right? So the same way that there's five parts of the soul, there's five worlds that we function in, right? And so he's bringing a system, right, of five sfirot, which is keter chokmah bina tiferet malchut, right? And so he's saying that keter. So he's saying keter. So why is this what we're learning important? Because if you understand, if you get this part, this is like gyms. If you get these parts, then you can go and understand what's being said in the text, right? Because all of these same terms that we're looking at in these configurations and these like these acronyms, these are written in the text. So if you don't know what the acronym is, you just see these words and this, and you have no idea what's going on, right? That's one of the things that we spent a lot of time with in Rabbi Shaddai's yeshiva in the old city of Jerusalem was learning the language of the Kabbalistic text, right? And learning how it's written and why it's written, because the way that it's written, the Kabbalistic text is written much different than, say, the Talmud, right? The Mishnah is written much different than the Gemara. The way that the Rishonim, the generations after the generations of the Gemara, the way they write is very different. The way that the Tanakh is written is very different than the five books of Moses. So all of these different frames of how things are written are in conjunction to different ways that they should be studied, right? So over here we're learning the language of the text, right? And so the language of the text, right? The language of the text is here, and you're seeing the build out of the structures, right? And he says that is to say that the world of Adam Kadmon, which is the highest level Keter, the world of Absolute is Chokmah, and the world of Bria is Bina, and the world of Yitzira is Tiferet, and the world of Asiya is Malchut. He says in that are in the lights that are enclosed in these five worlds are called uh, our five souls: Chaya, Yechida, Chaya, Deshama, Ruach, and Nefesh. But the word here they have for that is he says Yahan Ran, Yaharan. So this is the acronym for the levels of the soul. So you see the acronyms up here for these five worlds, right? Right? Kav, Hav, Tam. And you see the acronyms down here on the soul. So you see how the four worlds, and I mean the five worlds and the five parts of the soul, the five parts of the soul correspond. So he says the light of Yechida shines in the world of Adam Kadmon, and the light of Hayah shines in the world of Absolute, and the light of Neshama brings in the world of Bria. Just like what we said, the same way that he's saying that how we have five parts of the soul, each part of the soul is functioning in one of these sections of the five worlds, right? So our lowest part of our soul, our nefesh, right, is in conjunction with Asiya, right, which is a physical world that we're in, the world of action. The world above us is the world of Yitzira, right, which corresponds to the level of Ruach, of the soul, right? And then you have the level above that, right? Which is the level of the level of neshama. Neshama is connected to the level of yitzira, right? And you have the level above neshama, which is chaya, which is connected to the level of 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 absolute, and the level above that is yechida, which is connected to the level of Adam Kadmon, right? So he's making those connections. So those are the language. We know that there's four, there's five parts of the soul, and then there's five worlds. So right now you perceive yourself as just functioning in one world, but you're not. You're not. I know the history books didn't say it. They didn't teach us that in high school. Cambridge, Harvard, Oxford, they didn't teach it. Stanford didn't teach it. They say, no, this is the esoteric stuff. It's not real. What's real is in our history books. What's real is in our thing. But my question is, the people who are deciding to us what is and what is not, please tell me what correction process did they go through in their spiritual life that gave them clarity to see anything past the selfish state that they were born into? Please tell me. Please tell me white supremacy is falling down. It's falling down because you know what? I need to know your corrective process now. Because if you don't have a corrective process, you want me to buy into your perception of time, space, and motion. You want me to believe your perception, but how do I? With your conclusions that you came with, your perspective, you may actually have conclusions, and they could be written and they could be factual, and you have all the estimates, but that's only from your frame of reference. But if I change the conversation and I bring new rules and new structures involved, like the neshama and worlds and energy and the life force of the creator coming into the world, now your system falls by the wayside. V'kol elu ha'olod v'kol asher bahem. And he says all of these worlds and everything that they contain are included in the tetragrammaton, the four letter name of God. And in the tip, the choser, the tip of the letter Yud, for the first world, Adam Kadmon. That's crazy. So he's saying, so when you see the name of God as the letter Yud and the letter, hey, the letter, yeah, I'm saying it for learning purposes. Yud, hey, Vav, hey, right? Because if I don't say it right, I mean, the people think I'm saying it wrong. So the Yud, hey, Vav, hey, right? That famous configuration of God's name, that's the holy, holy name, right? Which is a channel of energy. Now we're understanding the holiness of the name. Now what it's saying is it's also connected to the five parts of the soul and the five worlds. But they're saying the letter Yud, Yud Hey Vav Hey, that Yud has a tip. The way that the letter is curved, he says the tip of that Yud represents the concept of Adam Kadmon. So the tip of the Yud is Adam Kadmon, right? The rest of the Yud, right? The rest of the hold on, somebody just came in. All right. Okay, so okay, so we're gonna keep going, and again, anything that you've missed is gonna be it's already recorded, Show, and you'll be able to go back over this. Okay, so he's saying that the tetragrammaton, the Yud Hey Vav Hey, the holy name of God, it works in conjunction with the five worlds. It works in conjunction with the five parts of the soul, and this is how it works. So he says like this. He says the tip of the Yud, all right. He says the chozot. It was a chozo, the chozo, the letter Yud, the smallest part. It's like it curls. It's the tip of it. This is the level of Adam Kadmon, which is the highest level, right? Imagine the smallest piece is the highest level. The second part is the letter Yud itself, right? And the letter Yud itself represents the frame of Keter. The hay represents the frame. Okay, so it represents Keter, right? Or I mean, or say, put it this way, you could say the letter, the atom, the small part of the Yud connects us to the world of Adam Kadmon, and it also takes us to the level of Chaya, which is the highest level of the soul. The Yud itself takes us to the level of Absolute, which is corresponds to that aspect of the soul, which is Chaya. The Vav connects us to the level of Bria, right? Wait. All right, so let's go through it. Let's just go through it because I was doing it outside. So let's figure this out. Okay. So he says, for the first world, Adam Kadmon is incomprehensible to humans, and therefore is hidden only in the tip of the Yud of the name of God. Hence, we do not mention it, Adam Kadmon, and speak about the four, and speak only about the four worlds. Abba, right? Right? It says Abba. I mean, it says Abya, Abya, Abya. So Abya is the four worlds, which is Absolute, Bria, and Yitzira and Asiya, right? And he's basically saying that even though we know that it's a five-part system, he said because Adam Kadmon is such a high level, we really only talk about the four worlds, right? But it is the fifth. The fifth is Adam Kadmon. It's the highest level. It's the tip of the Yud of the tetragrammaton, the Yud Hey Vav Hey, right? But and it's a part of the equation when you connect it to the five worlds and you connect it to the five parts of soul, this whole thing. So you can see that in there, right? So it says like this. And the acronym for that is Abia, right? And he says the letter Yud in the tetragrammaton in the world of Absolute, the letter Hey is in the world of Bria, and the letter Vav is in the world of Yitzira, and the second Hey is the world of Asiya, right? And he says the worlds exist like this. He says he says the Sphirot. He says so the Sphirot as Kav Hav Tam, and that is Keter Chokmah Bina, Tiferet Malchut, right? And then you have the lights, right? And the lights are um the lights are the lights are the aspects of the soul, right? Which is Chayakira, Neshama, Ruach, Nefesh, right? Not in that order, but that's the point, right? And so he's explaining this idea, right? So this is like very high level stuff, but he's giving us language, right? He's giving us language to understand the worlds and the level of the worlds. We understand the acronyms now. So when we see them in the text, we say, oh, well, he's talking about the five parts of the soul. Oh, he's talking about, the four worlds. Oh, he's talking about the difference, the parsufim, the spherot system that's connected to this, which is also five parts, right? So it says vehine nikal eru Hashem halamot shehem klaluim kol mitzvot. Sorry, mitzvot. So he says like this. Hamitzot. So he says like this. So he said, he said, now that it's clear that the five worlds include entirely the spiritual reality that flows from the infinite to this world. However, each world is included in each of the others. Each world contains something of all the five in the five spheros, right? The five worlds, the spheral system, and into the enclothing of the lights, which is the aspect of the souls. They parallel the five worlds. Who says he says umi malved Hashem ha sifrot. So he says in addition to the five sfirot, of Kahavatam, and he says there are present in each world. Each world also contains the four spiritual elements. So he says, okay, so each world. Okay, so we get more complicated now. I know this is where it's at. What do you want? You wanted to get it. Okay, so he's saying that there's four spiritual worlds. I mean, there's four worlds, right? We know the rock kingdom, plant kingdom, animal kingdom, human kingdom, right? Inanimate, right? So he's saying that he says in each of this five spherot, right? Which we're talking about Keter Chokmah Bina, Tiferet, Malchut, right? So those five levels, right, also contain four spiritual elements in them. So when you talk about Keter, uh, look, say you say Malchut of this system, this five spherot system, right? That system of this five worlds, right? Is each one of those worlds, right? So say you start at Keter, Chokmah, Bina, those are three worlds. Tiferet, right? And then you have Malchut, right? Those five worlds. He says each of those five worlds exist. He says the animal kingdom exists in those worlds, and the plant kingdom, and the rock kingdom, and the human kingdom, right? If that makes sense, right? So for example, like you have in the frame of Malchut, you have animals that are in the frame of Malchut. You have rocks that are in the frame of Malchut. You have plants there in the frame of a level of Malchut. You have rocks that are in the level of Tiferet. You have rocks that are in the frame of Bina. You have the rocks that are in the frame of Chokmah. And you have the rocks in the frame of Keter, right? So that's Malchut, and then you go up. I mean that's Malchut, right? So in every level of Malchut, I kind of skipped a little bit. I apologize. So if you start with Malchut, there's a rock kingdom, there's a plant kingdom, there's an animal kingdom, and human kingdom in Malchut. The same thing exists for the next level above that, which is say Tiferet. So in that world of Tiferet, there's also a rock kingdom, a plant kingdom, an animal kingdom. I mean, a plant kingdom, an animal kingdom, a human kingdom, right? And so that's when this kind of is answering our question about even within the different kingdoms, there's different levels of desire, right? And so the highest desire would be Keter, right? And I don't know if how much we went into this, so that's actually a good point. But either way, we're going to roll through it. We're rocking through it, and we have the power of review. Okay, okay. So he says the animal in the human kingdom, right? He says the animal. He said the soul of man is the aspect of human. The animal aspect is the angels in that world. The plant is referring to the levushim, the clothing, and the aspects of the inanimate referred to the chambers. Wow, he's literally open. Right now, we're just hearing terms, but all of these things are going to be active languages in the future, right? All of these different points, we're just getting used and configuring our brains, but all this is going to be active language in the future. He says their aspects are dressed up in one another. For the human aspect, which is the soul of man, is dressed up in the five spherotes, which are divinely in that world. And so for example, he says, yeah, there, for the human soul, there's a malchut, there's a deferet, bina, chokmah, and keter, right? Just like it is for plants and animals and rocks, the whole thing, right? Okay, so he says, which are the divine words? And he says, so this is language. Okay, so this is the type of stuff you want to go back and take notes and break down. Okay, this acronym means this explains this, and you can always ask questions and we can go into it together. And he says the matter of the 10 spherot being divine will be clarified in the preface to the Zohar. So we haven't gotten into the 10 spheros, which is the main structure. I don't know why he's doing it this way. Anyways, so he says the animal aspect, which is the angels dress up the soul, the plant aspects, which are the levushim dress up the angels, and the inanimate aspect, which is which is the yichot surround them. Now, what that means, I don't know, right? I mean, when I say I don't know how he's going to explain it, right? I understand the levushim, I understand the angels, I understand these different aspects, but in terms of where he's going to go with it, but I do want to stop here, right? Because I think that we took in a lot of information, and then he's going to really fly, and he's going to explain what the clothing means and everything else. You see what I'm saying? Well, actually, you know what? We could finish it. It's just one more part. Okay. He says ve'inaina, and he says ha hello levushot, and he says hazut ma siur be nain Hashem. So Hashem, and he says in clothing, meaning that they serve one another and then develop each other, much as explained regarding an inanimate plant, animal, and human levels. He says, in the physical world, he says, see chapter 34. He says, we explain there that those three aspects, inanimate, plant, and animal, the inanimate plant animal did not emerge for their own sake. They emerged so the fourth level, the human, can develop and ascend through them. That is the purpose for the first three elements, is that to serve man and help him ascend. The same is true for the spiritual world. The spiritual aspect of the inanimate plant and animal emerge there in the spiritual world in order to serve and benefit the human aspect that is there, the soul of man. In that sense, we understand that all clothes the soul of man, which means that they exist for man's benefit. All right, so that was I know it was a lot. It was like really big stuff. This one he really brought a lot of language. You know what I mean? Like a lot of what he brought here was like language and further structure, but this was big. This is big. This is very deep. Any thoughts and reflections on it?
I guess this is pretty heavy. Um, so I guess going all the way back to beginning and just kind of through it. The language course, I go back and really dig into that aspect and kind of break it down. But I like the point that he made about the worm radish, because what this does is this allows us to
Okay.
back on. I think so. So what it does is it allows us to realize that the world that we live is not. We don't live in a vacuum, in a bubble. You know, we don't live in a bubble. That the world is larger, and that there's so many other things on, but with the mindset that we do affect those things, that we are connected to those things. We are connected, even though someone in the country, we're still connected to their reality as well. Let's see.
Yeah, we're breaking up a little bit, but I think I got the core of the idea. But you can hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's do some halakha. Let's just do some halakha because I couldn't hear everything you're saying, but let's just keep going with it. And again, like everything's recorded, so like because I know there was some technical stuff that's simply going in and out a little bit. Okay, so let's go back in the halakha. We're in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. We're back in the candle lighting, bringing it down, talking about all the mystical worlds and the realities, but we still come down to practicality. Okay, and not saying what we were doing before was practical, right? It is practical. We live in these worlds. We live in these different realities. When we're lighting candles, right? Now we can realize that wait, we're not just in one world when we're lighting candles. We're in five worlds, right? And all aspects of our soul are in product to this. But we're not going to make it too heavy. Okay, so he says, Sarikin lehadlik be makom she'a kulu shehiye nachar she madlikin. Okay, so he says candles must be lit in the room where the meals are served in order to indicate that they were lit in honor of Shabbat. Right? I think we did this, but we're touching on it. They should not be lit in a place and transferred to another place. So you shouldn't ever light candles like in the kitchen and then move them to the table. You got to have them in one place. They got to stay there. He says, however, in times of pressing need, for instance, when a woman is sick and unable to go to the table, she may light them at her bed, and then and they may be placed on the table in the house. Mm. Excuse me, I apologize. Okay, so he says because the whole house is considered their place. Okay, so he's saying something like this. He said, don't just be moving candles around, right? They're sacred, it's holy. You put them, you're doing a spiritual act, right? He's saying, but however, there's leniencies, right? So a woman, like she's on maybe her ninth month of pregnancy, she can't move, these type of things. She could do that, right? Okay. And so he says because the whole house is considered their place. He says, and the woman who lights the candle in the sukkah and brings them into the house afterwards are not doing the proper thing, right? And he says, and the woman who lights the candles in the sukkah and brings them into the house afterwards is not doing the proper thing. So he's speaking during the holiday of Sukkot. We read this yesterday for sure. We don't like the candles in there, and you take them. Like sometimes, like people like he says he says when women are lighting candles in the sukkah and brings them into the house afterwards. So yeah, that's an interesting point. Like bottom line is saying we don't move the candles, right? Are there leniencies if you had to do it for health reasons or something, whatever? Yeah, okay. But in general, we want to make it a holy situation. Sari gale hadlik amha nerot bakol hadarim shemisha tameshem. So he says you must light candles in all the rooms that are being used. If you are at home with your wife, since he said the bracha on the candle in one room, it is not necessary to say a bracha on the lighting of the candles in other rooms. So he says you must light candles in all the rooms that are going to be used. If you're at home with your wife, and since she says the bracha on the candle one room, it's not necessarily to say the bracha in other rooms. Okay, so the bottom line is when you're lighting candles, is to have in mind that the whole house is sanctified underneath these candles that you're lighting, right? He says, but if you're in another place and you have a room for yourself, you must light candles and say the bracha. If several men live in one room, they should all share the cost of buying the candles. One of them should light them and say the bracha. So if a group of guys are living together, right? College or something like this, they all should like kind of like have a share in the candles, right? He says, and you should have in mind to include all of them in this bracha, right? So when you do your bracha, you bless the wine, the wife, the husband, whoever's doing it has to realize she has all of her kids in mind, that all of her kids are receiving light from this. All of the rooms in her house are receiving light. All the crevices, everything in the light is illuminated through this blessing. This blessing allows us to do what? Connect to the light of Shabbat that's coming. But if we don't say the bracha, we don't acknowledge that it's Shabbat light, we don't get it. It's that simple, right? It's that simple. It's like the whole thing is God is already giving. We have to acknowledge, and then we complete the purpose of creating. So lighting the candles is acknowledging this humongous, powerful light that comes down in the universe on the seventh day, right? And so it starts at nightfall, a shkia, right? And so before that happens, we know that the light just doesn't start; it builds up, right? It gradually progresses. So why it's gradually progressing? The woman says in the house, she says the light is coming in, and it's the light that was talked about on during the Ten Commandments. And it says that we should remember and we should sanctify, right? And so by me doing this, I now connect to that light that's coming in. But if I don't do it, I'm not aware, I'm not connected to it, right? Okay, so this is so that's the thing, right? And so okay, so he says like this: it should also have in mind to include bracha. But if you do not have a private room, but you're in one room with the host who is Jewish, who is lighting, you do not need to do it. So if you're like in your own place, I mean, you say you're like in the studio, you're staying by a friend for Shabbat, whatever, and he does the candles, okay, you're good. He says, and you need not, he says, and you do not need to light the candle since your wife is lighting for you at home, right? Okay, unmarried students who are learning away from school, from home, right? Kids going from college, if they decide to do that, away from home, and have a private room, they must light candles with the bracha, and they should also share in the cost of buying the candles. One of them should say the bracha and have them in all in mind. It is necessary that the candles burn until the end, until they return to their room. And if they did not have a private room, since there is no wives to light candles for them, they must give a coin to the host in order to acquire a share in the candles, right? So it's like the same thing. Like if a guy's single and he's somewhere, if he's staying by a friend in the studio, he says, "Hey, bro, I want to give you, here's $5. I want to just give it. I want to, we like candles. I want to be a part of it." He says, so he like kind of like in a way acquires it, right? Type of a thing. He says, one who's supported by the host is considered to be one of the household. It does not need to share in the cost. So like he's saying, like if your roommates is one thing, and it's another thing if you're just coming by, you're spending time at a friend's house, you don't need to be a part. You don't have to say, hey, here's some money for candles. He says, no, hagina halefilul kamash nashim. He said, it is a custom that even if many women light candles in one house, each one says the bracha over her own candles, because the more light, the more joy. However, care should be taken that two women should not light in one carbonaf or whatever it's called. He says, but in the times of pressing needs, and we may need to be lenient, and even in this regard. Okay, not so clear about this point. Okay, he says it's custom for women, even if a woman. Okay, he says custom that even if many women are lighting candles in one house. Okay, so you have a sorority house, all Jewish girls. Each one of them says a bracha on her own. Okay, because the more light, the more joy. Okay, fine. However, care should be taken that two women should not light in the same light in one cabernet, but in the times of so I get what I think he's saying is like if there's a set of candles there, like it's not like one person lights one candle and one person lights another candle. That's what I'm getting from it. But he says, if you don't have a lot of candles and they want to, do something, whatever, maybe you could do that. I don't know. I think that's what he's saying. Ein latain ma'im afilu mid od yoma letoka nachab. Sorry. He says no water should be put in even by day before Shabbat into the sockets of the candlesticks where you're going to place the tallow or wax so that it will be extinguished when it reaches it. But in the case of necessity, there's a rule that may be waived provided the water was put there in the daytime. All right. So in general, we put oil in. We don't do like the straw flag floating thing, and you have water. But again, you keep seeing a consistent thing. Do this, but don't go crazy if you can't. Right? If there's a financial issue, like they even said before, we learned if you just only got one candle, hey, you did the mitzvah, but you should do two. And a lot of people even have accustomed to do more, right? But the reality is that so same thing by here with the water, right? He says we don't do the water, but you know what? He says, hey, you maybe be able to get away with it. He says provided the water was put there in the daytime. So like I guess early in the day before Shabbat, like if you did it like in the morning or something like this, right? You just put it in and said, hey, maybe I use it for Shabbos. He says, by placing a vessel with water underneath a candle lamp. I think it's just like it's like a big like candle, right? It's like a lamp. He said this is strictly forbidden even when placed when it is still daytime. He says, but by placing a vessel without water to intercept the spark is permitted even after dark because sparks are not tangible. Placing a vessel to catch the dripping oil or fat is forbidden once it is dark, or for should he says, for should oil or tallow drip into the vessel, it should be forbidden to move the vessel. Consequently, you are neutralizing the vessel from its state of readiness, which is forbidden because it is considered as though it were fastened there. By placing it there, it is still day is permitted. If oil dripped into it, you are forbidden to use oil on Shabbat, and you are not allowed to move the vessel. And if oil drips into it, it is not forbidden to move the vessel merely because of intent. So that was a lot to unpack there. Um, review, review, because we got to keep going. So it says, Tov alehanicha את החלות על השולחן קודם. So he says it's best to put the chalot on the table before you light the candles. Okay, so that's a big thing. So he says, I don't know why. He says, see, he's going to bring it up in chapter 89. We're in chapter 75. But he says there, they're going to talk about it. I'm not going there, but we can. But he says, it's better to put the challah on the table before you light the candles. I don't know. That's what he's saying. He says, Isa suma ima yishla ba'ala yidlik ha ba'ala vivarech. So he says, if a blind man has a husband, if a blind woman has a husband, he should light the candles and say the bracha. If she does not have a husband and she lives alone and lights the candle and says the bracha, if she lives in a house with others, they light the candles, and the blind woman lights the candles without a bracha. If she This is really deep. I mean, how does she know how to light if nobody's there? So he says, if she is the head of the household, she lights first and says the bracha, and afterwards the others should light their candles and say the bracha. So that's an interesting point. So someone comes to your house and stays over for Shabbos, the people, the balubai, the people of the house go first, and you go second, type of thing. So he says, Isha shechacha shechacha pa'am achata dali hadlik. So he says, if a woman once forgot to light the Shabbat candles for the rest of her life, she should usually light one candle extra more than she usually was. If she forgets several times, she should always light an extra candle for each time. So this is kind of intense. He said this is done to impress on her to be more careful in the future. Therefore, it was due to, therefore, if it was due to an emergency that she should not light her candles, she should not light additional candles. Thoughts, reflections, ideas.
I was thinking, I said maybe that's one of the reasons why they have some places have so many candles lit. Could be, I don't know. When you're talking about seeing like a shrine or whatever, could be that. I mean, I've also heard that women light them for their children. But I was thinking about how the whole process of the candle lighting relates to Rabbi Ashlag and the worlds and all of the different things, the emanation, the creation, the formation, and the action, how it kind of ties in together. You're talking about moving the candles versus not moving the candles, the emanation, the light, the source, and so forth. It just kind of made me think how to kind of connect it. I'm not quite sure, I'm not quite there, but I'm trying to make the
You're
connection
working through it. You're working through it.
from
You're working
there.
through it.
Yeah, just kind of working through it a little bit.
Yeah.
But Toda for the lesson, Rabbi. Toda.
Yeah, yeah. So we're good. I mean, the key thing is like we gotta really go. We gotta really think this out. You know, we gotta really think this out and say, hey, what is the structure of reality that I believe in, right? Because we haven't really had options to choose. You know, we just kind of like, you know, we grew up, we went to school, this is what people know, this, blah, blah, blah. But I think it comes to a point where we say, hey, you know what? There's multiple ways to look at reality, right? And there's different systems of thought around this. And so the question is like, which one am I going to use, right? What is going to be my system? What frees me the most, right? Because I have the power to choose, right? And so that's the reflection point, you know, is to really think this out because for me, this system of thought makes more sense, you know, and it's connected to a much bigger idea, and it's part of a corrective process, right? So anyway, so let's stop here. We're going to continue tomorrow, God willing, about Hashem. We're just going to keep pushing forward, just more positivity, you know, more love, and just let's just contemplate on these ideas. They're all new, you know. Some of them are not new, some of them are new, and just contemplate them. It's not about reacting to them, but and let's apply them of looking at to see, you know, if we could say like over Shabbat, if we could really try to focus on everybody's soul at the table, right? Like really think about their soul and to think about like what is that so if I had to think about it, what does that soul want? Right? On a deep level, not like a superficial level. Like what does that soul want? You know? My brother, my sister, my mom, my wife, my husband, you know, what does that soul want? Out of all the things, how does the desire of this soul manifest, express itself, right? And I think it's a very important lesson and tool to start cultivating expanded consciousness, right? And to be able to start looking at human beings from a soul level. What is that soul going in? What is it, this expression of desire, right? Because that human being, the way he's dressing or she's dressing, the talking, all this is connected to desire, right? And that desire is connected to this root concept of a soul, right? And as we know that this soul is now connected to this concept of all these different worlds, right? So all these things are playing a part in this person's outfit, in this person's conversation, these things. So I want to just start contemplating humans on a deeper level. I want to be able to kind of like critically analyze, you know, on a deeper level, like people and where they're coming from, and then I could develop empathy, right? Because you know, if they came into this world and they came and you can see that they're struggling, they may be insulting you, right? They may be doing something bad. That doesn't mean you should stay around and be, you know, taken advantage of, but it's just saying that still at the same time, I could look and say, well, that's where that soul is at. They're at this place of this correction process in their stage of correction. And so because of that, there's, you know, all these other probabilities that come out of it. But more importantly, I could see them on the developmental process in the same way I could see the desire of that plant and see how that plant is growing all the time. And I could see how the animals are changing. And I could see the structures of the mountains and rocks. And I could see these things and say, wow, you know what? I got to be patient with everything. You know, I got to give everything its time and the space to grow. And their growth and my growth may be in the same world, but it's not really dependent on each other. It's our own individual work. You know what I mean? In these things. So, Tony, so we're working through these points, and you know, we should just have compassion. I mean, that's the key thing. The more empathy we have, the more of man, Chava and Adam, right? The more we become that. That is the purpose of man. Is to have the ultimate level of compassion, to be like the Creator, to care for all creatures, all levels, have all things and souls. I mean, all things in mind when we pray. All the souls that are wondering, and all those things of compassion makes us into a man. All those things of empathy make us into a man. And that's what separates us from beast. So we have to constantly be expanding our ability to have empathy, our ability to have compassion, our ability to see others as ourselves, to see nature as ourselves, to see animals in ourselves, to see plants in ourselves, rocks, all of that, because that is the structure of the ultimate man, right? And so that's where the learning we're trying to get to is to say, like, no, my purpose is to have empathy and connect to all things, because that is how that inner aspect of the neshama, or the inner aspect of the soul that is developed after 13, that's how it comes out. It comes out through this empathy. It comes out through this. It's not just reading a bunch of facts in the Torah. It's what the facts of the Torah make us do, right? And so now we see this whole system coming together, and we're like, wait, God is always giving. We got to acknowledge the ultimate level of our existence is to care for all things, right? To see all things coming from one source, right? To take the responsibility for humanity and all the things that I do, right? Okay, so any last thoughts, ideas?
That makes me think sometimes when you have positions of authority, and often when you have that position of authority, you think like, okay, because I did this or because I did that or whatnot. I'm just speaking like even as a mother, you're like, okay, well, I made sure you eat, I made sure this, I make sure that, and so forth and whatnot. But a lot of times, the children need more. They need, to be respected and to be heard, to actually go that extra mile to just kind of get to know like what they're thinking and what their desires is. And so it's not so much, and I know a lot of times we may have been raised like that to say, well, I clothed you, I this, that, and the other, but you have to step back and really look at them and know that they have a soul as well, and their soul needs to be nourished. And so that is something that I truly desire to be more aware of and more conscious as I just as I exist. The animals, like you said, the different things, just making sure that you're not just moving in the mundane, but literally slowing down and being a light, but also being able to allow their light to come forth as you nourish their souls. So that was just something I got from what you just said.
Amen.
Awesome.
There. Okay, so we'll continue. Were you saying something?
No.
Well, you're breaking up again.
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, so we'll finish the class. We'll continue on tomorrow, God willing, before Shabbat. And we're just growing. We're growing. New ideas, new structures, new language. But the key thing is, and this is what I wanted to say earlier, is I was talking to Chief Rabbi Pinchas about it earlier, and one, he has a women's class. All right, so we went on that. All right. So, anyways, we'll continue on tomorrow. All things are good. Baruch atah Adonai le'olam. Amen.